So let's dive into the Sermon on the Mount. And let's start with a little bit of silence. And then following the silence, I'll say the Our Father by myself sort of slowly, which will allow you all to emerge, hopefully, at a easy pace from the silence. And I think maybe the text to get us into the silence today is the very text of the gospel appointed for today, in which Jesus says, if the single grain of wheat doesn't fall to the ground and die, it remains simply a single grain of wheat, and it doesn't bear fruit. But if it falls to the ground and dies, then it bears much fruit indeed. And I think this is a good metaphor for, practice of silent prayer. In meditation, this is going to not sound like great news, but in meditation, what we're doing is practicing our own deaths, We're practicing this ultimate letting go. And, that's not bad news for Christians, because for Christians, letting go of everything that is less than or other than love, this is life's journey. This is the whole trajectory. This is what it's all about. And we Christians live according to this funny paradox that to die is actually to live. So that's what he's offering us in that metaphor. You are the grain of wheat. I am the grain of wheat. And but that we would fall through the bottom of our own lives, letting go of everything that is less than or other than love. Letting go of the illusion that all of these things that are other than love will actually do the trick. And this is silence is just a little practice at that. So I'll offer our prayer sentence, then I'll ring the bell. I'll hold this in 2 minutes. I'll ring the bell again. I'll say the Our Father by myself, and we will dive in to the Sermon on the Mount. So now the silence after the scripture which says, "Be still and know that I am God." Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. All right. So let's read a sermon. I'd like to read it. I think we did this last time. Every time we get together, read everything that we've studied up to, this point. So, Meg, you look like you have the text. You've already been a lector today. Are you willing to stay in lector mode?
Absolutely. You tell me where you want me to jump in and I'll hit it.
Okay. So what I want you to do is you'll start us off. So you'll read the Beatitudes. So Matthew 5, 1 through 16. 1 through 16. Mary, do you have the text? Would you read for us today? Mary, will you pick up at 5 and 17 and go on through 5 and 30? And Joyce, will you read today? Joyce, will you pick up at 5:31 and go through 48? So you'll read the rest of chapter 5. So 5:31 through 5:48. And then, Virginia, do you have the text there? You want to read 6, 1 through 8, which is the, that's today. That's what's appointed for today, if I'm reading my schedule correctly. So 6, 1 through 8. Good? And we'll just read it, of course, straight through. So, Meg, you can start us when you're ready.
When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. He opened his mouth and began to teach them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great, and in the same way they are persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except for being thrown out and trampled underfoot by man. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on the lampstand, and gives it light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven."
Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "You shall not murder," and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. And anyone who says to a brother or sister, "Raka," is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. And you have also heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell.
It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made." But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. You have heard that it was said, "Eye for eye and tooth for tooth." But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, "Love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect.
Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, so that they may be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. When you are praying, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him.
All right. I love hearing that over and over again as we're studying it together, because it just, listening to you guys read it so beautifully, just allows it to sink in even deeper, ever deeper in my own little life. I want to do just a little review and then open up the conversation. You remember that so many weeks ago when we started this, we started in chapter 4. So the Sermon on the Mount starts in chapter 5, where Meg started us off, but we started in chapter 4, the scene before the sermon, which is the temptation scene. And you remember that in the temptation scene, Jesus is led out into the wilderness by the Spirit, where he's tempted by the so-called devil. And he's tempted in 3 different ways. And the way that I summarize the temptations is that Jesus is given 3 opportunities at the power grab. The devil says you can have a lot of power, you can secure your own survival and security, and third, you can be highly esteemed and approved of. And of course, I'm riffing off of Thomas Keating's 3 programs for happiness. And at each turn where Jesus is given these opportunities to really bolster his own egoic drive, right? Like lean into the shadow side of humanity, of human nature, that is. He says no. And essentially what he says is God alone is good. You know, I will live the surrendered life. I will not take these opportunities to grab at power. And then what I've come to realize in this pass through the Sermon on the Mount is that the Beatitudes are then, of course, the very next thing that happens is he gives the Sermon on the Mount and he starts with the Beatitudes, right? So the Beatitudes are this confrontive response to the 3 temptations. Because it's Jesus saying, no, I'm not going to be sort of your instant celebrity, ego-driven power grab guy. In fact, I'm going to lift up and celebrate the powerless. And then he gives this, the Beatitudes are this laundry list of sort of, Lord, people who just deserve our pity, It's like this sad sack bunch of folks at first glance. At second glance, the Beatitudes are the saints among us who have fallen through the bottom of their own lives and are now living out of their grace-soaked humility, right? The one who mourns has fallen into the depths of feeling loss over the death of the beloved, let's say. Does that make sense? The one who is poor, just everything has run out on her. The one who is persecuted has lived into the love that Jesus describes when he says, no one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends, And you can picture John Lewis on the bridge. Y'all remember that? I mean, can you see that in your mind? I mean, here we are, blessed are the persecuted, And so the Beatitudes are these folks who are, again, living out of their humility. When Meg was reading it, I wrote this note of the Beatitudes. This is what love looks like when it passes through the filter of sheer humility. That sort of makes sense? Like the sheer spiritual gift of humility, which you can't work to get. Life has to give it to you. When love passes through that filter of humility, it looks like the cohort of the Beatitudes. So what we're doing in the Sermon on the Mount is we're on a bear hunt. We're on this adventure looking for our own values. And the devil, as it were, gives us, the one version. We could have these values of power grab and the temptations. And Jesus gives the alternate. These values that are operational values, which are love manifesting in our own lives. The salt and light are what we are for the whole community, for our community. What is it? Lexington, Atlanta, Topeka, Ontario, doesn't matter. Wherever you are. When we proceed from that beatitude stance of humility and love emerging through the filter of humility, we are salt and light. And we're salt and light because when we walk into a room, like literally and figuratively, right? We're this curious, not critical people. We're this illuminating, not overpowering people. We're this humble, not opinionated people. We walk into a room and the natural flavors of the situation are enhanced by our presence. That's salt, right? And so I love it. Jesus didn't say you are the pot roast. Like he didn't say you're the main course. He said you're the salt, that which enhances the gifts of the people you're with. So church people really, what we want, and y'all are church people. If you showed up here, you're church people, which is great. It's not a bad thing. What we really want is not for people to fall in love with Hendry, not for people to fall in love with Helene and Kristen and Virginia and Mary and Meg and all the rest. We want people to fall in love with God. And so our prayer is that God would have us be light or salt that draws attention not to us, but is us being conduits for unmediated God experience. Isn't that beautiful? So then building from there, what Jesus does and what Amy Jill Levine calls the extensions concerning anger, concerning adultery, concerning divorce, concerning oaths, and on and on and on. And so as he says, okay, let's flesh this out a little bit more. I'm going to give you some particular concrete examples. And as you bring your humble beatitude love stance to these particular examples, this is how the value further manifest as an operational, this is what you do, concrete operational acts in certain, situations and contexts. So on page 54 in Amy Jill Levine's book, which is where our selection for today starts, in her book, I love the line that's almost dead middle of the page on page 54, where she writes, although Jesus is Lord, Jesus insists on taking the position of any other human being. Right? So this is like the fundamental stance of Jesus of Nazareth, the Christ. And by extension, I think it's our fundamental stance. Although, Mary is great, although Joyce is awesome, although Pam is very learned and beloved, we insist on taking the position of any other human being. And that's how we become salt and light along the way. So, what in today's passage, or anything that's come before, reaches out and speaks to you in some way, whether it causes a question, gives you hope, gives you pause, depresses you, confuses you, what do you got?
One of the things that came to me with the, chapter 6, 1 through 8 was, it turns out it's not about me. And if I want to do this right, it's when I make it about me that it loses its value.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I think you're hitting us all right where we are on any given day. The good news in that is the word hypocrites. So some of you know this. You may have heard me or others say this before. But that word hypocrites in the passage Virginia is talking about, chapter 6, 1 through 8, and I think he uses it 2 times, maybe 3 times, at least 2 times. That word hypocrites in the English has a real pejorative. Like, you hypocrite, we think it's kind of a thing we say, and it's not a compliment, right, when we say it in our vernacular. Probably a better translation from the Greek, we're told, is actually actor. Actor, A-C-T-O-R. So what Jesus is saying is you don't have to act. In other words, you don't have to put on a persona, put on a mask, put on a costume. Just as you are, you're absolutely worthy and perfect and able to pray or give alms. And that hypocrite or actor word, I think, is much what Virginia's sharing is comes into play when I think I've got to be something other than I am, right? To impress you or to impress myself or to feel good about myself because I feel less than. And so this is a real beautiful moment where Jesus says, you don't have to act. Who are you? Just pray like that. Who are you? Unvarnished. Who are you? Just give alms like that.
And I think this flies so much in the face of all of our current culture, current society, which is all about be seen.
Yeah.
Be the best, be seen, do it in front of everybody, get the most likes on Facebook or whatever whatever your media is if you're not an old person, as they say. It just flies in the face of all of that. And I think the issue of humility, for me, I would say across the last couple of years has really been more about cultural humility, as I've been involved on our staff and doing work around anti-racism and dismantling white supremacy culture, and really the humility of the work that I have to do internally, and not to assume that I know how to be helpful to others, but to ask the people who might be in need of help, to ask them what might be helpful to you, rather than me coming in and trying to save the day by doing what I think is the right thing.
Wow, isn't that well put? Beautifully put. So, Mary, so then the ultimate in sort of operational humility is me walking into the room, I'm going to say something heroic, making no assumptions, assuming nothing about you and your context.
And being willing to listen.
And being willing
to listen. And again, for me, as somebody who speaks a lot, I think fast, I walk fast, I talk fast, I do everything kind of fast. And sometimes instinctually, intuitively, it's pretty on the mark. And a bunch of the time, it's way off the mark. So for me, slowing the process down and taking time to listen first. I realize right now what I'm saying probably comes to what I've been reading in Living Compass, because there's a lot of recent stuff about listening.
Yep.
And so I want to own that. Some of that's coming from elsewhere. This is not all coming from just within me on this morning unbidden. So credit where it's due.
Yeah. Beautifully put.
I agree with Mary. I've really enjoyed trying to teach myself to listen more and going through the Living Well through Lent. And it's all about listening. And we miss so much when all we do is listen to answer back instead of listening to actually see what someone has to say or what's on their mind and what's going on with them. And then you take the focus off of you when you're listening to what they're telling you,
Yeah.
So, and it's funny, your own problems become quite small when you start listening to others.
Amen. Yeah.
You find out there's people with a lot worse things going on.
Yeah. Beautifully put, Carol. And there's something in there that sort of, I thought about this, I think for the first time today while y'all were reading, the contradistinction, is that right? You said that word, between the hypocrites in 6 and the Beatitude, the cohort of the people in the Beatitudes. I mean, the Beatitudes folks they're done putting on airs. Life has beat them up. That's like, they tried that, it didn't work. And I have this sense that they're listeners because they don't even know they're being talked to or talked about. Sheer humility.
Can I talk about money?
Please.
I really like the section where she has the different levels of giving.
Oh, yeah.
And it comes down to what is the best. But don't we actually partake in all of these levels?
I think so. So you're talking about pages 56 and 57, thereabouts in Amy Jill Levine's book. Yeah. Say more, Joyce.
Yeah. And 58, yeah.
Yeah. Say more.
And so they have the best one, the 7. But isn't God pleased if we do the lowest level as well, like giving unwillingly? I mean, isn't it that to be part of our giving?
Absolutely.
So there's no, there's a distinction, a great distinction between all these levels. But when you stand up in the front and you say, Christmas, let's all dig deeper.
Yeah.
And to meet our budget, I mean, we do that.
Well, even in that, the lowest level is giving unwillingly. Many of us have been there, responding to the friend who asked that we contribute to her favorite charity, whatever.
Yeah.
In some ways, that's the lowest level if we give resentfully because it's her favorite charity. Or you could turn that around for yourself and say,
Yeah.
This is my friend and I love her and this is important to her. And so I will do the same, right? Right. Again, it is, am I going to make it about me and that I don't really want to do this? Or am I going to remove myself from it? Right. Which, we've all been there. There are plenty of times when I'm like, oh, I do not want to do this. right? But that's me. I'm making it about me instead of choosing a different perspective on it.
I love that. What you're both sharing really helps me. I hadn't thought about this till y'all brought it up, but the lowest I love this line on 57. The lowest level is giving unwillingly. Well, some days that's just where I am. In 12-step, we say you fake it till you make it. So, mostly you don't want to fake it, but if you flip that, it's like, no, you fake it till you make it. You just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. And some days, I just give unwillingly. I love the idea of the 8. Joyce, I hadn't thought about this till you mirrored it back to me. The 8 is just sort of a continuum, and I move up and down it. Mm-hmm. Heck, tomorrow I might give it at 6, 7, or 8 level, and then on Tuesday I'll be like, nope, I'm back at 1. And that's okay. Like Jim Finley says, I think God finds us especially precious in our brokenness, in our inability to get it right. But he's just like, oh man, they're trying. They are sour attitude folk today. They don't want to give anything. They just cussed the dog and kicked somebody. But boy, I love them. They're faking it till they make it. Faking it. Teresa of Avila in Interior Castle, she maps the interior spiritual journey in 7 dwellings. And she says, look, you're going to go back and forth. Some days you're going to be in dwelling 1 like a newcomer, like a babe. And then, the very next day you could sort of rocket ship up to mansion or dwelling 5 and, be this sort of fount of wisdom. And then the very next day you trip back up and go back. And, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
That's good. You made me feel better about myself then.
No, that's the journey, isn't it? Yeah.
The pledge that we give does that count as charitable giving?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because the pledge is for electricity and your salary and all these other things, but is charitable giving, does that mean giving to the poor and needy?
Yeah.
And are we giving to the poor and needy when we give a pledge? Are we supposed to give above and beyond that to do our charitable giving?
Yeah, what a good question.
I think so, because my income varies. It's when God blesses me, I get an income, or sometimes I get better than that, and that's when I give a tithe. And, for example, I'm going to give an Easter tithe coming up soon. And I wait for the Lord to tell me how much to give. And then that's His will.
And it's not how I feel or anything. I just listen for him to tell me, and that's what I do. And I do that willingly because that's from the Lord. So that's good. And so you're going to see a check soon, Henry.
Wow, well, thank you. That's beautiful. Yeah, beautiful.
And I also think about sort of is it tax deductible or not?
Yeah.
Not that it's wrong to deduct on your taxes. It is a thing, but it is different to me, the things that I know are going to be tax deductible, I'm going to keep track of, versus, today's a really good day. I'm feeling really blessed. Yep. I have $20 in my wallet. I'm going to drop that in the plate, and it's cash, and I'm never going to get a receipt for it, and it's never going to get in my taxes. Or the random, somebody has a charity that they're raising money for, and it might not be my charity, but you just go ahead and say, here's some money for this thing that you're trying to do because it's important to you, even though I'm never going to see any fiscal benefit from it in terms of my year-end taxes. So again, not that one's better than the other, but they are different. And I think the generosity of spirit that can come from things that we know we're not going to account for, that are not going to sort of go into that final, April 15th tax document.
Yeah, helpfully put.
Remember, this year is May 17th.
That's right, yes. One of the things we say, Joyce, to your question, and again, we can parse words, and words are all we got, so we just play with them, right? One of the things that we talk about when we talk about giving money is that giving money as a part of our spiritual journey, which often manifests as a pledge, like you said, is actually not charity. It's giving of our resources as a part of our spiritual journey. Because we believe that a spiritual journey is like if you could map out one's personal spiritual journey in the image of a pie, then the pie has all kind of different pieces to it. And one of the pieces of the pie is taking some measure of my own resources, often money is the, exhibit A, and putting it outside of my control through the ministry of the church. So, and that the key word is control. So I have particular financial resources, and for me to carve off a piece of that and put it on the altar outside of my control is vital to my own personal spirituality, my own personal spiritual journey. It's a part of that letting go that we always talk about. Secondary to that is that it funds the ministry of the church. First thing, though, is that putting it out of my control. So we talk about it in terms of not being charity per se, though, again, it's just a word and we can parse words all day long, but being a part of one's personal spirituality. The second thing we might say, or might say to your question is, yes, the church gives money to charitable sort of outreach. We like that word, right? Stuff. And yes, a part of your pledge goes to outreach. But we also offer, and kind of to Mary's point, all manner, life offers, and the church does too, all manner of different opportunities for like straight up charitable giving. Like the Good Shepherd sent $5,000 to flood relief last week, or 2 weeks ago, right? That's just straight up. Something happened and we responded to it. And, that was our money, your money, stuff we gave. And so that's how I'd sort of answer that question. Is it charity? Not strictly. It's spirituality. Is charity leavened into it? Yes. Are there opportunities above and beyond, like Mary says? Yes. Or should I give to Virginia's favorite charity, even though I don't like her favorite charity? Yes, because it's good for me to practice that level 1 too. I really do think so. Like, you ever exercise and do something you don't want to do because you know it's going to work another muscle group, right? Or you ever exercise your mind by reading something? I don't like, World War II history, but I'm going to read this because it's going to exercise another part of my sort of mental apparatus.
He doesn't feel that way about my favorite charity. I don't know what it is, but he doesn't feel that way, so don't worry.
That's right. That's right.
I never even give a darn about the whole tax thing. It never crosses my mind. I must be poor because I don't care.
There you go. There you go.
It was funny to me this year because my tax preparer actually asked me, and I was like, by the way, I have been, but I never even think about it. So I liked the way y'all have the Saran system, and we can just set it up, and it's automatic, and it's gone, and you don't even think about it, you know?
Yep.
And I just committed a long time ago that, you know what, you waste $5-6 on a Starbucks, how often? So I'm just going to make that my permanent thing, and you never even notice it. And it might not be a whole lot, and maybe sometimes I could give more, but that just keeps it consistent throughout the year. And like I said, you don't even notice it, and it all adds up. If we all gave that, we'd all be doing much better. And then I trust the church, like you were saying. Y'all pick certain things that need help, like the flood thing, or the church under the bridge. These different things that we do, our money's all pooling into that, isn't it? Isn't it?
Yep.
So I trust you guys to make those decisions.
Well put.
I would say along that line, my decision to do deductions for charitable giving on my taxes is because then I wind up having more money within my control that then I can choose where I give it. There are a lot of things at the political level and especially at the federal level that I don't agree with how the money is spent, and I don't have any control over that in a lot of ways. And if the government takes a smaller chunk out of my money, then I have more money left to either give to Good Shepherd or to Habitat for Humanity, or for what it gives me more control over my choice about what's valuable and being able to share the money in those ways. So that's, my own kind of reconciling money and how to keep track or not keep track of it. That sort of is the equation that I came to that seemed to fit for me. Because otherwise I would give the feds a whole lot more money every year, going to things that I maybe don't want to support. So like war.
What a creative way to frame that, Mary. I love that. I never thought about that. That's a real creative, positive way to frame that.
That's why you got to vote.
Love it. So what else in here, whether the passage appointed for today or the all that we've read up to this point in the sermon emerges for you? It raises a question, gives you hope, gives you pause, confusion, clarity.
So I noticed that in verse 7 of chapter 6, when you're praying, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard because of their many words. It made me think about, filling up the room with words and then conversely sucking the air out of the room. Right? We've all been in situations where we just thought, oh my gosh, read the room and stop talking. Right? Like you are like, everyone's in pain here and I need you to close your mouth. And then conversely thinking, oh gosh, I hope I realize if I'm ever doing that. Right? Like I hope I can see it and hear it and stop myself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
From doing that.
I lived in an interesting time back in the early 60s when prayer changed. That somebody wrote a book about prayer, conversing with God, and prayer became more conversational, and it didn't have to be each person in the room going around the circle praying the same long prayer, which is what we had done. Each person prayed Our Father and went to Amen with everything in between. And when it went to conversing with God, it was, I could pray for one thing and you could pray for the same thing that I just prayed for, a different aspect of it. And until that topic got not used up, but, got covered. And then somebody could introduce another topic and it could bounce around the circle. And it was just a totally new idea of how praying could not be just babbling phrases like the text says, but it could be real conversation with God.
So how did that feed you, Joyce? How did that affect you?
Well, it's kind of scary to be sitting in a circle and know that your turn is coming, and you kind of count the people. And then you say, I'm next. And then you worry about whether you're going to remember everything, and worry about if you've really covered everything you're supposed to say. And so there's a lot of freedom in that, conversing with God. It also allows more silence in the prayer and really listening to what other people are saying as well.
Yeah. Beautiful.
You're too young to remember that, huh?
I am. I think you said the 60s, and I was born in 1975, so I missed that development.
Well, I was, the 60s, I was in college, and I was in a Bible study group, and that's where that was introduced. It was the same time when all the different translations started coming out.
Yep.
And so it was really a time of freedom, of learning new ways to think about Christianity and my journey and my life.
Sure.
Yeah, and our life.
Yeah.
I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
In chapter 6, they talk a lot about rewards. I don't understand.
Good.
No reward here, and everybody else has received their reward for standing up and being a hypocrite. And
yeah. So what's the deal with the rewards? Is your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, good question.
Is a reward the same thing as a blessing?
Yeah, I think you could parse it like that. What I would say is it's really simple. I love this device Jesus uses because it's really simple. And he's not even really denigrating the actors or the hypocrites. He's really not. He's just saying when you stand up and get noticed, to contemporize it like Mary did so helpfully, get all those likes, we talk in this, that's the reward. Like you got it. The attaboy, the attagirl, being heard, being seen, having your name in lights in whatever way, that's the reward. You've received it. And I think what we all know in our own way is that there's not much depth to that. And one of the ways we put it is, once you attaboy or attagirl me, or one of you guys, that creates an appetite for another one. Which is not to say that we should say good job to people. We should be encouraging. So let me speak out of both sides of my mouth, right? But if that's all I'm in it for, just chasing likes, just chasing compliments, just, that's all, that'll be it. And there's no depth to it. And it's not something, being seen is not something that sustains in and of itself. It's not a self-sustaining, right? Because now I got to go be seen again and again. Thomas Keating always says the problem with the programs for happiness, especially like esteem and approval, is once I get Mary to like me, now I got to get Kristen to like me, then Virginia to like me, then Meg to like me. And Lord, there's 6 billion people on the planet. So where does it end, So your reward is just, okay, we saw you. No depth to it.
And is that why being a teacher... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Joyce.
Is that why being a teacher, doesn't it say somewhere that that's one of the hardest things? Because you're standing in front of people all the time and showing yourself and just taking from your own mind and your own heart and putting it out there. And then if the kids respond to us, then we are getting our likes, and we need to get those likes so we can make progress.
Yeah, I think that's right. We could let Kristen and other teachers talk to this, but I would say my sense of it is, Joyce, that so Kristen Harrison has been a teacher for, well over a decade, a long time. Has taught hundreds and hundreds of students, right? And I'm going to say it, the vast majority of the people she's touched deeply, she'll never know about. Isn't that right? So, yeah. Am I right, Kristen? So why do you teach? That's a good... I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, especially in these days, they're in I've told y'all before, mine are all in a computer. So that's even more challenging. But worthwhile. But no, I think it is challenging. I was actually thinking about it from the student point of view while we were talking about reward. We offer these positive rewards to try to encourage them, and I don't know. I haven't landed on a solid thought about it yet, but it is interesting when you're, especially in this virtual world, some of our rewards are just that. They're just a point, a virtual point. You got it. And it's just a virtual point. I mean, that's all it is. And I was actually thinking about that last week. Some of them are really motivated by that. And that's great on some level, but it can be frustrating to me too, because I want them to want more than a virtual point, but that's exactly if that's what you're going for, you got it.
Yeah. Well put.
And like you've said before, Hendry, too, we've got to start somewhere. When you're talking about 7 and 8 year olds, you've got to start somewhere. So there's nothing wrong with that. But we of course have to, as a society, work for more than that virtual point.
Don't you think, Kristen, as a teacher, one of the things that we really have to teach kids is how to be glad with their own selves, and to learn how to say, hey, I did a great job on this, without needing that reassurance from outside?
Yeah, we've got to.
Because so many of the kids are so dependent on their peers and thinking they're worthless unless they get this from the outside world and the peers. Then that's where we end up with these kids that are so messed up and end up, looking for other sources of happiness, like drugs and gangs, and getting involved in the wrong things.
Or even the answer. I had a real interesting interaction on Friday virtually, where this one child was just wanting the answer, to give me the answer so badly that he was getting it from his little sister, who was off screen whispering in his ear, but I could hear him. And I sat them both down. We were all sitting, and I said, I'm not interested in you giving me the answer, or your little sister giving you the answer. That's not what we're here for. And we had what I call a come to Jesus real moment. I need you to come to the answer yourself in your own brain. Your little sister whispering it off screen is not the reward, to bring it back to our language here.
Right.
Yeah. And I think they heard me. We'll see how long it lasts. But they both, you saw the little light bulb go off, and this will make me choke up. Even the little sister off screen, I've never seen her. All I've ever seen and heard is her whispers. She goes, sorry.
Oh, gosh. Oh, no.
I'm thinking about Pam's question, too. Do we want the reward of our friends going, clap, clap, that was great, or our audience, whoever they may be? Or do we want Jesus patting us on the back after we, or in silence in our own rooms, or after we get to heaven and saying, well done, faithful servant?
Yeah.
That we can choose the one or the other, the good or the bad.
Yeah. And the reward, the depth of reward is found when we're living out of our true selves. When that which we say and do has its source in the deepest roots of our own authentic being. So for a teacher, this is you want my take on teachers? I'll risk this in front of my teacher wife. If teachers are not called to be teachers, they shouldn't teach. I'll risk this in front of my nurse sister. If nurses are not called to be nurses, like if that doesn't come out of their deepest well of authentic self, they should not be nurses. Or only be a nurse or a teacher on their way to finding what it is they should be doing. Does that make sense? Because they're going to be miserable, as will their students and patients be miserable. Mary, I bet we'd say the same of mental health providers. That's your world. If you're not meant to be a therapist or a mental health, please, God, don't do it anymore. You know,
especially don't do it because you're working out your own stuff.
That's right.
Which does happen. And, going back to what you had said, Henry, in terms of, this striving for external recognition, you use the word appetite, for more. I would even say anxiety to receive more. Because, again, I think in our public spheres, again, whatever the social media or other context might be, it's like if you put something up and nobody responds, as opposed to, or only 2 people respond as opposed to like 200 people responded, but oh my gosh, that's the most amazing thing ever. And the anxiety when you put it out there about what's the result going to be as opposed to the authentic self being expressed, doing what you do. And again, holding lightly what the outcome might be and that internal world of, the affirmation from God and the sort of, to me, very meaningful when an individual person aside, not in front of anybody else, says to me, that was really helpful when you did this thing. I appreciated the support, whatever it might be. I wasn't doing it for the purpose of having that support affirmed. And sometimes I don't even realize necessarily I did anything, and I'll say that others have done great kindness to me that they didn't recognize was any kindness or support. And sometimes when I've said, wow, that really got me, as you said in the sermon this morning, through the gap, that they were like, I don't, what are you talking about? And so sometimes the surprise, and again, I think with that, the humility, the humbleness of recognizing that when we're being our authentic selves, we're doing what needs to be done, and sometimes don't even recognize it because there's not a striving for the recognition or for some specific end result.
Sure. It puts me in the mind, beautifully put, Mary, it puts me in the mind of the widow's mite. I have this sort of sense in my head, and have for years, that the widow's mite, yes, she's giving money, and so it's a good thing on that, but also I have her as a living metaphor. She's pouring her whole self into the ministry, and she doesn't know she's being watched. She doesn't have any clue that she's the example. She doesn't know what a help that she's being. She doesn't know that she's virtually immortalized in Holy Scripture. She doesn't know any of that. She's just being her. That's just her giving of herself to life itself out of her true self. Beautifully put. And then the reward is, back to Pam's question, so the end of verse 6, in 6 and 6, your Father who sees in secret will reward you. I think that, to me, that's that reward that is a felt reward. It's just, you feel it in your bones and in your cells and in your heart. And it's not even recognized so much on the conscious level. It's just like how would we put it? You're in the flow, or you're in the groove, or there's a deep knowing that you're doing what you should be doing because of who you are. At the end of the day, even when she's having a bad day, Kristen has to roll out of bed and teach because it's who she is, And if it wasn't who she was, she would have to do something else. But Mary, I want to say something that occurs to me. When I say, if you're not called to be X, you should do something else, I say that from a place of privilege. Because the vast majority of the people who have ever lived on this planet, vast majority, right? And that's not hyperbole. They just have to do whatever it is in front of them that they can do. The vast majority of the people do not have the extraordinary privilege that I do. I won't speak for you guys, but I'll speak for myself, to be able to choose what they do. The vast majority of the people who've ever lived on this planet have not had one iota of the educational and vocational choices that I've had since I was, frankly, 8 years old, probably.
And I really appreciate you bringing that, because I do think that's sometimes, it's so easy to take it for granted. Yep. I'll speak for myself in my everyday life, that I'm well educated, I work really hard, and I'm well compensated for it. And there are so many people, not just around the world, but here in Lexington, who don't have gainful employment.
That's right.
And would be really thankful to have some way to earn a living doing something. And again, maybe not something they would ever have chosen or aspired to, but the number of people who don't have the option to do anything that's gainful. I mean, we all have choices about doing something every day, but in terms of the ability to earn a living, on my phone, not your iPad. So many people never have the opportunity to have the resources to make those choices.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. I have found, and I feel it's a gift that God has given me, my love of animals, and particularly horses. And I have continued to pursue that gift, whether it be not making hardly any money and having a difficult time, or now I've been fortunate enough to have landed this wonderful position I'm in West Virginia. But a lot of people never really hear, I think, the calling. They're not really open to, and they're not listening to know where it is that God is trying to guide them and to learn what their gifts are. Because I think he gives all of us gifts, but it seems like a lot of people never really touch on figuring out what their gift is. And so then they just do whatever they got to do to get through life, and they're not following a passion, if you will, which is rather sad that they haven't learned to get in tune to find where it is that God really wants to lead them, you know?
Well, and I think sometimes if it is taking every breath you have and every scrap of your being to survive, right, then it can be hard to even have the privilege of trying to listen to your passion. So I think that's a good thing for us to remember and think. And I remember when I was, and this is even still out of privilege too, but very early in my career as a bedside nurse. So I wasn't making a lot of money, but I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life, right? And I just one day gave some money away, right? Like, I don't even remember what charity it was to, what it was, but a thought occurred to me. I'm so rich, I can give money away.
Right.
I have always remembered, right? And I wasn't making a ton of money. I was working 36 hours a week as a, new grad nurse, right? Like, had a lot more money than a lot of people, but not a whole lot of money, right? But I just had that feeling, and I am thankful that I felt that feeling, I grabbed that feeling, and I tried to keep that always, that one of the ways that I can feel rich, whether I am or not, is to give money away, right? Like, whatever that means and however much that is, but that was, and nobody knew that but me, but I could feel that as a reward on the inside of how that made me feel.
That's true. Very good.
Well put.
And I think that's one of the blessings of making a pledge, is that ahead of the next year, not knowing whether I'm going to have a job, not have a job, what's going to change, am I going to be healthy, not healthy, that I look and say, right now, I feel like I can commit this much resource, and that it's not sort of, waking up next week and thinking, oh gosh, money's a little tight this month. I think I won't give money to the church. I think it helps the priorities stay really firmly set. And again, knowing that, like, if somebody doesn't have a job, obviously Good Shepherd's not going to come knocking on the door of the bill collector.
Right.
But that sense of prioritizing, making that commitment, even without the certainty of what that next calendar year might look like.
Yeah, nice. Meg, were you going to say something?
I was just sitting here sort of percolating over cycling back to the idea just of the amount of privilege to be able to say we want to follow our passions, because I followed my passion when I was fresh out of college, and then I had Ollie, and my passion shifted from doing what I loved to do. I was an opera stage manager and traveled the country.
Wow.
But my passion then became, I love my son and want to be the mother he deserves. And so he's almost 11. It's taken 11 years for me to find a job that allows me to use my passions in a different way. But I worked a lot of jobs that I didn't like doing because my passion was being a parent who could provide for my son. And, I still had privilege. We had a home. We had the things that we needed to survive, and I could find something to do. But I didn't get to follow what I was called to do because what had to be done was more important. And so thinking about that ability and that where our privilege plays in is sort of huge.
Oh.
That's definite, Meg. Been there, done that as a single mom. Waited tables, cleaned houses. You got it. And I think that's where we as women are lionesses when it comes to our kids. And we're going to put what's important to us aside to put those kids first. So, yep, for sure. Got to put passion on hold sometimes.
Beautifully put. Well, it reminds me, I mean, I'm repeating myself, but this is a mind-blowing deal to me. The vast majority of people who have ever lived on this planet were subsistence living. Is that the right use of that word? You're just every day? Yeah. The vast majority. I mean, wow. And to Meg's point, just fighting and scrapping every day for, keeping kids fed, surviving the day. That's just amazing.
But when you say that, it makes me think that we all are not giving enough.
That's right.
I've been thinking about sacrificial giving, like Christ says, love one another as I have loved you, and he certainly sacrificed his life. So in what ways do I sacrifice anything? And then I started thinking about my offerings, my pledge, my charitable giving, and everything else I do, and how much of it is sacrifice. And I don't know that I ever reached that point. What is to sacrifice? I'm not sure where that line is. And anyway, sacrificially giving. So I need to dig deeper. But, I don't know, because then you have to be smart too.
That's right. Yeah.
You have to be smart because that's the talents, the 5 talents and the 10 talents. And
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Anyways, that word sacrificial giving, that's been on my mind. That came out of our Bible study talk. And
yeah.
That was kind of my question with the reward part. It kind of like you feel like you have so much, it's never enough. It's never enough. You can never do enough for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a reward because you're not looking for a reward, I guess. And that was the question. I think that's the basic question. It says your Father will reward you. I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't know what that means or how it even applies.
Yeah.
Because when you're really, really, really blessed, you just can't do enough. There's just not enough. You never feel adequate.
Yeah.
Are you saying because you feel like you've already got enough that you don't really see where you need a reward, or you don't understand what your reward would be because you feel so blessed? I'm trying to understand.
No, I think there is no reward. I think when you're really, really blessed and you do all that you can do, it's never enough. It's never going to be enough. You'll never feel like it's enough. Even Kristen doing her teaching, do you really feel like it's enough? Do you ever really get the feeling like, oh, I've done a wonderful job today, or I've done a wonderful job this year? Do you ever really get that feeling?
No, it's simply put.
So that's what I mean. That's kind of what I get at.
I think there's these moments. I think this is what sustains my faith is moments. And it's never enough, and it's always just fleeting moments. I'm not as good as talking about all this as Hendry is, but just the being in the flow, you feel every now and then as if you're in the flow is how I put it.
and it's a sense of peace, and that is the reward. And I've been blessed enough to receive that sense of peace, and as if I'm in the flow, several times in life. And it's those moments that I cling to, and I think, oh, that's the reward. That's when I was in the flow and listening, and actually this just occurred to me, but I think a lot of times we're receiving that reward and we're blind or deaf to it. Maybe we're receiving it all the time, but we're just so, busy and stressed, and that we're blind and deaf to it. And maybe that's why I get a glimpse of it. It's just glimpses, because maybe those are the moments where I'm listening and looking are still enough to hear it.
Yeah.
I think, Pam, that every time you feel blessed, I think that's part of the reward. That blessing, I feel blessed. So you're doing dinner for room in the inn, and it just gives you that warm heart feeling. And I think that's part of the reward too, where that God's telling you that you've done the right thing.
Yeah, and to put it real practically for me, the reward is these little notes that I'll receive, or even text messages this year in the virtual world from parents, and I'll save them, and Hendry will remind me, save that one, because those are the rewards. They're these little affirmations. I even had one, it's funny these days, you've got people listening to you that you don't know that are listening to you because they're in another room or whatever. And I had a parent text me an affirming message, and she wasn't even referring to her own child that I was working with. She was complimenting me and thanking me for work I was doing with another student that she noticed I was doing during break time. And, I thought they were all on break. I was muted to them, and they were off doing whatever while this one student and I were working. And this mom messaged me saying, she was cute. She said, I see you. I hear you. You're giving your break time to that child to give him everything he needs. And it was just out of the blue, just a message, a little text message. So that's the reward. I say no, I don't receive it, because no, I always want to do more. But yes, I do receive.
And
that's an example. Isn't that wanting to do more? Like, that in and of itself is the reward. When you're doing, you're doing the good work and you're in the flow, that you see the opportunity to continue to give. And so the fact that you have that opportunity, that in and of itself is the reward. The reward, or the quiet moments when you look at your house and it's like, oh my gosh, there's calm and there is peace, and like, look at all the love that we have contained in this house. Even though 30 minutes ago we were thinking, dear God, we've been here for a year and I may have to kill you next week if we're gonna make it the rest of us out alive. But those blips, those held lightly moments are what it is, knowing that we can continue to find them.
Beautiful. And the way the scripture puts it is, my life becomes a prayer, right? Paul says we pray without ceasing. That doesn't mean we're really pious and that we always are walking around saying the Our Father. It means exactly what Meg and Kristen are saying. It means that our life becomes a prayer, and it's unconscious. You didn't know that mom was listening. You were just being you in that moment. And this is the salt. I think this is us being the salt and light. I mean, you can't try to be the salt, right? You have to kind of unwittingly be the salt, to put it playfully. Get in that, as you said, Kristen, in that flow. And then we become as John of the Cross puts it, the living flame of God's love. Isn't that cool? And then what we're doing, Pam, I think my answer is like, then we're just always wrestling. Like Jacob, the Old Testament story of Jacob wrestling. We're always wrestling, to Joyce's point with, how much money am I supposed to give away? I know it's supposed to be more, so let me keep wrestling with that. And I'm not going to worry about it and try to slay that dragon today. My life is just going to be wrestling with that, wrestling with how much I should give of myself in whatever manifestation for all of my days. And in that way, we become one with God, who does not want us to get it right. God doesn't give a darn about us getting it right. God cares about us continually showing up, like continually wrestling with the particulars of my own call and my own particular life every single day. And I think the reward is in verse 6 is, and that's the life well lived. That's the life well lived. I want to end with this little piece of Thomas Kelly that I think is a bit of an answer to this question that you're bringing us back to so helpfully, Pam. Check this out. This is Thomas Kelly, A Testament of Devotion, which is a book that I tell you, if I had to only take one book to the desert island other than the Bible, I would take this one. Much of our acceptance of multitudes of obligations is due to our inability to say no. We calculated that task had to be done, and we saw no one ready to undertake it. We calculated the need, then calculated our time, and decided maybe we could squeeze it in somewhere. And by the way, this was written in 1940, not 2021. So the problems of anxiety and worry are not new. But the decision was a heady decision, not made within the sanctuary of the soul. When we say yes or no to calls for service on the basis of heady decisions, we have to give reasons to ourselves and to others. But when we say yes or no to calls on the basis of inner guidance and whispered promptings of encouragement from the center of our life, we have no reason to give except one: the will of God as we discern it. Then we have begun to live. Then we have begun to live, that is, in guidance. And I find that God never guides us into an intolerable scramble of panting feverishness. The cosmic patience becomes in part our patience. For after all, God is at work in the world. It is not we alone who are at work in the world, frantically finishing a work to be offered to God. No, life from the center is a life of unhurried peace and power. It is simple. It is serene. It is amazing. It is triumphant. It is radiant. It takes no time, but it occupies all our time. And it makes our life programs new and overcoming. We need not get frantic. God is at the helm. And when our little day is done, we lie down quietly in peace, for all is well.
What's that book by?
Thomas Kelly. And I wonder if that's a poetic description of the reward, that's described in verse 6. Even the sacrificial life that Meg describes so beautifully, situationally, makes me think of the sacrifices my own mother and my own parents made. And it wasn't a scramble of, what does he say? It wasn't an intolerable scramble of panting feverishness. The sacrificial decisions, a lot of times they're easy to make, even when they're hard to make, aren't they? Are you nodding, Meg? Yeah. And right? And there's the reward, the knowing that, no, that's what I must do. That's the reward.
Which goes back to, if any of you haven't watched the movie that Hendry was talking about, Greyhound on Apple TV, you should go watch it. Because same thing, what was his reward? And he felt like he had fallen short taking care of his guys.
That's right. That's right.
And yet, if you watch it, you will see exactly what you said was his reward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that was a great, great movie. Of course, Tom Hanks doesn't do anything wrong, right?
So there we are. If we're looking for our values and we are in the Sermon on the Mount, then I think what we get today maybe is that we have as a value as Christians living a life that yields an unseen reward. It doesn't yield winning this election or getting that like on whatever social media, It's an unseen reward, a reward that is felt and sometimes not felt deep underneath the surface of our own lives. So this seems like a spot to end for today. Wow, what a gift you all are to me and to each other. Thank you 1,000 times over and over again. Stay safe. We'll see you out there and see you here next week. Peace.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
God
guys.
bless.
Be with you.
Peace.